Good to see everybody out this morning. We're in Matthew chapter 8, and I believe we got down to verse 18. Matthew chapter 8 and in verse 18. We'll read down through 22, and then we'll get into that part of the study. So it says, "And when Jesus saw great multitudes about him, he gave a command to depart to the other side. Then a certain scribe came and said to him, 'Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go.' And Jesus said to him, 'Foxes have holes, and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head.' Then another of his disciples said to him, 'Lord, let me first go and bury my father.' But Jesus said to him, 'Follow me, and let the dead bury their own dead.'" It's a whole lot right here wrapped up in these few verses. But so if you notice that many times when these great multitudes pressed on Jesus, especially after he just got through teaching or whatever it might have been, that he got away from them. There were some times he needed to get away. And, many times we see him when he went to pray, and he went to pray and that kind of thing. But here he wanted, so let's go to the other side, and they're going to go to the other side of this body of water, this sea. And so, as he's getting ready to leave, this scribe comes and says, so who would have been a scribe?
It's a writer of some sort.
He's a writer of the law. Yeah, he would have been a writer of the law, so this would have been a writer of the Jewish law. So he came to him and said, "Teacher, I'll follow you anywhere you go. I'll go. Wherever you decide you want to go." He saw Jesus was leaving. He said, "Wherever you go, I'm going to follow you." And then Jesus says, he gives him this scenario: foxes have holes, birds have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. What was the teaching there? When he says, "Hey, I'll follow you wherever you go," Jesus said, "Well, come on, let's go." But what did he tell him there? He said it's hard. It's in other words, where did Jesus have a home? When he started his ministry, where was his home? Think about it. His home. Did he ever have a home that we know of? So there was no. We know he spent some time in Capernaum, where he'd grown up in those areas. But once he left that area, once he started his ministry, when you follow his teachings all the way through, we never see him saying, "I'm going to go home for a while." And that's what he was saying is if you're going to follow me, there is no home base.
That's part of it.
Yeah.
He never have a home again because he's busy at his father's work.
Yeah, so he's out teaching, he's traveling, he's doing all these things. And he said, if you're going to follow me, here's what you're going to give up. There's not going to be a place where we go and we rest and do those things. He said, I don't have. Foxes have a place where they go to rest, and the birds, they go to their nest at night. But Jesus didn't have that. He didn't have that home base. And he said, this is how it's going to be. Now, he didn't say you can't follow me. He just wanted him to understand that if you're going to follow me wherever I go, there's not going to be a home base. You're going to be giving up a lot to follow. And you think about his apostles. When he came to his apostles and said, "Hey, you've been chosen, follow me," what did they do? It says they left all. Think about that. They left everything and followed him. How many of us would be willing to leave everything and go?
We're going to.
Yeah, but while we're living, let's put it that way. I mean, you think how many of us would just say, "Okay, I'm gonna leave everything behind. I'm gonna follow you." Huh? A lot of the missionaries do. They do. And you think about that. They say, "Hey, we're leaving here. We're going to go spend this time on that missionary field." And they do. They leave everything behind. Many times family behind. And so we see some people willing to give those kind of sacrifices. But he wanted this scribe to understand it's not going to be, all this glory. And, we're not a rock group going around doing concerts. We're, this is you're going to be giving up some things. And if you think about it, he's never asked us to give everything up. Ever. except, he said, if you're going to follow me, well, first thing he said, if you're going to follow me, you're going to do what? Deny yourself. Deny yourself. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to necessarily have to give up our home or give up that, but what does it mean that we deny ourselves when we follow him?
Your interest comes before his.
It's like your self-interest become secondary. He wants to be first. There's first. That's going to become your first responsibility. You're going to take on that responsibility. Deny yourself of some of those things. And I think sometimes we're not willing to do that. Even deny ourselves a little bit sometimes. We're not willing to do it. But he said, I don't have a place. It's not going to be what you think. Here's what you're giving up if you're going to do this. And then he had another of his disciples said, let me go first and bury my father. And he said, you follow me and let the dead bury the dead. Does that sound cold? That doesn't sound cold. But what was the point of that teaching?
He comes first.
Huh?
Christ comes first.
Right?
Didn't they have ritual of burial stretched out for about a year?
Yeah, they did it. And a couple of things I read about it is they don't think at this point his father would have actually died. Because during that time, like Ronnie says, they had rituals they went through when one of their parents died. He would not have left the house where his father had passed if he had already died. So what they think this man is saying is, he was saying his father was maybe sick and close to death. So what he was telling him is, let somebody else take care of that. If you're going to follow me, let them take care of that, and you come and follow me. And he wasn't being cold hard about it, but there again, his teaching was that there are some things you're going to give up if you're going to follow me. And so it makes more sense when you think of it that way. That he would not have been out there if his father had just passed away. He wouldn't be there with Jesus. He would have been following those rituals they had of the burials and that. But he was at the point of death, possibly close, and he said, no, you come follow me, let them take care of that. And sometimes we have to give up some things like that. I mean, I've known people that once they became a Christian, their family actually ostracized them because of their obedience. And you think about that. Would you be willing to obey the gospel knowing that now you're going to have to leave family behind? Because they're not going to accept you as being a Christian. And this was happening a lot back during this period of time. You think about all of those who left, had to leave. In the early Christians, when they obeyed the gospel, the day of Pentecost, and they all sold their things, and they had everything in common, and they all were right there in Jerusalem. And many of them, when the persecution started, they left. And they went to all these different places. But many of them had to leave because they didn't have their homes anymore, because they were rejected by their families. And so I think Jesus is teaching them this now, but I think he's also leading into what's going to happen later on as well. There's going to be times when you're going to make a choice, and you're going to have to leave these things behind to follow me. And it would be very difficult to make that choice, wouldn't it? It would be very difficult. And so I think that's what his teaching was here, what he was trying to get them to understand, that you can follow me, but will there be some sacrifices along the way? Absolutely. It's not going to be what you're thinking it might be. Any other thoughts on that teaching?
Well, in Luke it says, no one having put his hand to the plow looking back is fit for the kingdom of God.
Right. You don't start and lead. You don't go and lead. Yeah. That's a great point. When Luke says that, you don't put your hands to the plow and then look back. What happens when you're plowing and you look back? Your row ain't like this anymore. It's all over the place. And that's what he was saying. You don't start living for Jesus and then leave and go back. And then, it's not a go back. It's a commitment. And I think that's what he's trying to say. This is a commitment you're making. So it's a good point. So let's read the next section, 23 through 27. It says, now when he got into a boat, his disciples followed him. And suddenly a great tempest rose on the sea, so that the boat was covered with waves, but he was asleep. Then his disciples came to him and woke him, saying, Lord, save us, we are perishing. But he said to them, why are you fearful, O you of little faith? Then he arose and rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was a great calm. So the men marveled, saying, who can this be, that even the winds and the sea obey him? So here they get in this boat. We're not really told how big this boat was, or whatever it was, but there was several people on this boat, so there would have been a larger vessel. And as soon as they got out there, this tempest rose, this storm rises up. Now, how many of you have been in a storm on the water? It's pretty scary, isn't it? It's pretty scary. You know, when you're in a storm on the water, and the waters rise up, and you know, there are times there you think, are you going to make it? You know, are you going to make it back, and that kind of thing. And this was that kind of storm that they were so fearful. It said the boat was covered with waves. So the waves were coming over the boat. They weren't just, you know, rocking the boat around a little bit. They were coming over the boat. They thought they were going to die. And so, but Jesus is asleep. That was the first amazing part to me. Here you got this storm comes up. You know that boat's being thrown around all over the place, but Jesus is asleep. And he's at peace. And they come and they wake him up. Now, if we were in this scenario, put yourself in that scenario, what would you have done? Would you go wake him up? But I think it's interesting when they go to wake him up, I think I would have too. He said, Lord, save us, we're perishing. And some of the other versions of this, when you go into Mark and Luke, he said, don't you care that we're perishing? In other words, we're perishing, don't you care that we're going to perish? But so they think they're going to die, so why wake Jesus? What had they seen of him? They called him Lord, but they had seen all these miracles he had done. You know, the healing of the sick and the demon-possessed people and all these things that Jesus had done. And so now they're in this dilemma. They think this boat's getting ready to sink, and he's down there sleeping, and so they go to wake him up. Say, hey, you know, we're going to perish here. And so I think it shows, did they have some faith in him? It's going to, we say, yeah, they did have some faith in him to go to him to wake him up. But then later on, he's going to challenge their faith. So it's interesting, they go to him, they wake him up, and first question to ask, why are you fearful, O you of little faith? I try to put myself in that situation and think, okay, how could I have better shown my faith if I was in that situation? Just say, y'all hang on, Jesus ain't going to let us die, right?
It was normal with their reaction.
Yeah, I think it was kind of a normal, to me it seems normal that reaction of fear was there, and evidently, you know, they're waking him up. So I think they kind of leads me to believe believe he had some power to help that situation. But when he gets up, he said, why are you so fearful? Oh, you of what? Little faith. He didn't say they didn't have any faith. He said, oh, you of little faith. And then what does he do? Rebukes the storm. In other words, he says, hey, storm go away, and all of a sudden, guess what? Immediately, it becomes calm. So you look at this teaching, and when he says, oh, you have little faith, he didn't say you have no faith. They had some faith. I think they had exercised some faith in him by coming to wake him up and having this knowledge he could do it. But I think he said you have little faith in the fact that they didn't have faith enough that he was going to let them perish. That he was going to let them perish. Because if they were going to perish, did you think he would perish too? I mean, the boat goes down. You know, I try to put myself in what their whole mindset would have been. And, you know, They're probably running around crazy saying, well, what are we going to do here? Let's go wake him up. He can do, he can perform miracles. Let's go get him. But they didn't have faith enough because they didn't totally understand all of his ministry yet. Because if they'd have totally understood his ministry, they would have known that he was not going to let them die. Because he hadn't finished his total ministry. But that's why I think he says, oh, you have little faith. They didn't believe that in him enough that he was not going to let them die without them waking him up. But I think this also happened for another reason. Because I think all the miracles that Jesus performed were to prove he was a Messiah. But think about who he's with here. This would have been his apostles, other disciples that were with him, that were going to be traveling with him, that would later on be those who were going to be those out spreading the gospel. So what was he proving to them and to us today, really, in this miracle? What was he proving to them?
He's in control.
Huh?
He's in control.
He had power over everything. He'd already proven to them he had power over sickness, over death, over demons, over the demon-possessed. He had this power. But now he's showing he had power over nature. You think about it, he was the creator of it. He was the creator of the things that were going on right now, so he's teaching them he has the power over those things. And so, how much does this now increase their faith? He says, oh, you have little faith, but how much did that faith increase once he calmed the storm? And now all of a sudden they're not going to perish. You think about how that built their faith up. If I'd have been there and I saw him do that, would you question anything going forward from there? I don't think you would. Yeah, you marvel. They marveled at it. They're going, who is this that even the winds and the sea obey him? He's now proven himself to be who he is and have the power that he has. So I think it's really interesting how these things happen for a reason. And I think everything we study about Jesus and his life and the things that happen, they're there for a reason. They know why. There's a reason why these things are happening. So it's a good lesson for them and for us. Is there anything that Jesus doesn't have power over? Remember what God said? All authority has been given Jesus where? On heaven and on earth. So he had the power. He had the power over the earth. Even under the earth, yeah. He had power over all things. So he was teaching them that, but it was a scary situation for them. But I'm thinking, boy, he built their faith. If he says they had a little faith, guess what he just did? He just built it where it needs to be. Other comments on that teaching? All right, let's read the next section. We're going to read 28 through the end of the chapter. It says, when he come to the other side, to the country of the Gergesenes, there met him 2 demon-possessed men coming out of the tombs, exceedingly fierce, so that no one could pass that way. And suddenly they cried out, saying, What have we to do with you, Jesus, the Son of God? Have you come to torment us before the time? Now a good way off from them was a herd of many swine feeding. So the demons begged him, saying, If you cast us out, permit us to go away into the herd of swine. And he said to them, Go. So when they had come out, they went into the herd of swine, and suddenly the whole herd of swine ran violently down the steep place into the sea, and perished in the water. Then those who kept them fled, and they went away into the city and told everyone, including what had happened to the demon-possessed men. And behold, the whole city came to meet Jesus, and when they saw him, they begged him to depart from their region. So, put yourself in these people's shoes as well. So here he comes to this place. These 2 demon-possessed men were violent. It says when it said they were exceedingly fierce, that no one could even go by them. And everybody was scared to even go by the way where they were. They were exceedingly fierce. And that's what demon possession did to them back then. A lot of them were demon possessed. It seemed it affected some differently than others, but these were so demon possessed that they were violent. It was dangerous. So nobody would go near them. But when they saw him, what did they say? So what do we have to do with you who? Jesus, the Son of God. They recognized Jesus as being the Son of God. Now, how would that have happened? I mean, there were so many people there at that time didn't believe that he was Jesus, the Son of God. But these demons knew, they recognized he was Jesus, the Son of God. How did they recognize it? They were spiritual. Exactly. So, and the other thing they said, have you come to torment us before the time? So here these demons, number one, they know who Jesus, the Son of God, is. And they recognize him immediately, of exactly who he is. Then they say, have you come to torment us before our time? So what does that tell us about demons? And the followers, these would have been followers and quote-unquote angels of Satan. What's going to eventually happen to them?
They'll be judged.
They're going to be judged and they're going to be punished. They knew that as well. If you want to learn more about that, come on Wednesday night and study Revelation with us. Because we're going to get to that at a point here where you're going to see how, in the end, Jesus is going to be triumphant over them, and they are going to be punished. But they were like, they recognized it and said, hey, you've come to punish us before our time. You know, they didn't understand that this was something that maybe he's here now. Maybe this is not going to be in the future. Maybe he's here now, and it's before their time. They knew that it was going to be at the end of time when these things are going to be happening. But they recognized Jesus. And there again, if those traveling with Jesus heard them say the same thing, what would that prove to them? This is Jesus. This is the Son of God. We don't have to doubt that.
Were they not thrown out of heaven with Satan? They
Yeah.
would have recognized Jesus as God's Son.
Right. So it's thought that as Satan was thrown out of heaven, that his followers were thrown out as well. So they would have known who Jesus was by that. And I think that's a good point. We talk about fallen angels. That's really what they would have been. So they were followers of Satan, recognized who Jesus was, and knew they were going to be tormented. They knew that they were going to be overcome by Christ in the end. They had no power over him. Yeah. They could possess humans, but not Jesus. He had the power over them. That's a good point. So they asked him and said, hey, if you're going to get us out of this, in other words, if you're going to cast us out, and they knew Jesus had the power to cast them out of these men that were possessed, give us permission to go into these swine. So Jesus says, go. And it's immediately they leave these two men, and they went into this herd of swine. We don't know how many. There was a large herd of swine. As soon as they entered them, said the herd of swine went violently down the steep places of the sea and perished in the water. Here's my question for you. Did the demons also perish in the water? No. Where did they go then? So you think about it, and Chloe and I discussed this a little bit about when these demons were cast out, where did they go? They went and did other works. They entered other people or doing other works. They didn't actually die at that point. They went out and did other works. And that's why they, instead of him casting them out and casting them down to be tormented or punished, he said, let us go into those swines. But then, I don't believe they perished. They went then and did other things as well, because it wasn't their time to be punished. But imagine you're the caretakers of these swine. And all of a sudden, all these things are happening, and all of these pigs all of a sudden go running down the side of the steep hill into the water and drown. Would that freak you out?
Yes, makes their livelihood.
Yeah, and it's like, and it said, boy, they immediately went, it says, that those that kept them fled. They didn't go casually back to to the city. It's like they fled and went into the city and told everything that had happened even to the demon-possessed men. So they had witnessed Jesus casting the demons out of these demon-possessed men into the swine, so they knew why these swine had gone down this hill, because they heard it all. Because they went back and told everybody in the city what had happened with these demon-possessed men. So they saw the whole thing happen. And so, if you're in the city, you're hearing this, what would your reaction be? Well, what was their reaction? They said, behold, they came to meet Jesus. The whole city came out to meet Jesus. And when they saw him, what did they ask him?
Told me to leave.
Please get out of here. Please get out of here. Why would you ask Jesus to leave?
Because you fear me.
They had fear. There's no doubt they had this cast fear into them. But did they recognize this as Jesus?
They were Gentiles. The Jews didn't keep pigs.
Right.
So these were, and they were not, they were just afraid.
Yeah. These probably were Gentiles. Right? Would y'all agree they probably were Gentiles? Because what were swine to the Jewish people? They were unclean animals. So these were keepers of the swine. They probably would have been Gentiles had they really known about Christ yet. They really wouldn't have had all the prophecies about Christ and all those things that have happened before, and they might not even have heard of Jesus at this point, because we kind of assume, many times we assume that everybody that was alive back then knew who Jesus was, but that's not true, because guess what they didn't have? Internet, social media, word spread by mouth, and the way things went. So they probably had not heard of Jesus yet. They don't know, who is this man? And they see this, and that part of their livelihood's gone, and they said, please leave. We don't know who you are or what's going on. Of course, they saw he had the power over these demons, and these demon-possessed men were healed, but they were like, please leave. They didn't understand. If they'd have known it was Jesus, do you think they'd have had a different reaction? Sure they would have. But they didn't know who Jesus was. But there again, I think all this happened that you think they told anybody about this? They told everybody about this. There again, and this is Jesus. We see the purpose of the miracles that he performed and the way he did them, and how they would have heard those demon-possessed men say, you are Jesus, the Son of God. They would have recognized that. Now that's going to be spread about. Now he's going to show he's got the power of these demons. What happened with the swine? And all of this is going so that he can prove that he is truly the Son of God. That's why all these things are happening. And this is a pretty dramatic. I mean, this is not a little thing happening. This is a dramatic happening. And I guarantee you this spread all over the country of what had happened there. And there again, Jesus' fame is going out more and more.
When I hear the term swine, I think of hogs. And when I think of the Mideast, I think of arid climate and goats and sheep and camel, maybe a few chickens. I don't think of hogs. Is that sort of an unusual sign of some sort that they would put swine in that area?
Well, I think there were parts of the area there that they did have them, because we know they were unclean. They would have been an unclean animal. So I think there were parts of that area, and I didn't study about this city and where it was located, but there were some areas that weren't as dry and desert like we think of dry and desert. There were some areas that was different than that. Though we know that there were swine that were located in that area for sure, because they're mentioned more than once. In fact, Jesus uses them in his teaching. Later on, the apostles used swine in their teaching as well, so they would have been a common animal back then. I'm like you, I don't think of a pig being in the desert, but there would have been areas that they would have been, populated in for sure. And this was a large group of them too. So they had them there. There's some guy who owned a barbecue restaurant going, oh man, where am I going to get my meat now? You know? But anyway, any other thoughts about these teachings? I think these things happening are all happening to prove who Jesus is. And the miracles, the power he possesses, and all these things are happening for them, but they're also happening for us. So we know who Jesus is and what he was capable of and all those things. So